Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no coping. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. Hey everyone, this is a friendly reminder that we are here for entertainment purposes only. We may not even be that entertaining at times, but this is not medical advice. Talk to your doctor, check with your healthcare professionals before making any lifestyle changes or medicine changes. What we're talking about is our clinical experience and what we've seen. And so if you really want our advice, you can consult us. You can actually consult me as a doctor, or you can consult my guest and get all your questions answered. But we can't give free medical advice because we can't pay our bills with that, but we can help to educate you a bit and allow you to think a little bit. And always reach out to your medical professional before making any lifestyle changes. Thank you. Hey everyone, it's September already. The kids are going back to school. We have to get ready for the holidays and all that stuff. Our summer's pretty much behind us. And so I'm very thankful that we have some great episodes that will keep us company and get us back on track and get ready for the holidays and hopefully survive the holidays. We need some tricks of the trade to get us through. And so I want to thank Health Code, Get Health, GETHLTH.com for helping us to have tons of recipes and baked goods, things like that to get us through the holidays so we can stay healthy and not have to start next year trying to get our pants to fit again and all that kind of stuff. So staying active with them and also with Keto Mojo, keto-mojo.com for us to track our sugars and ketones and keep us healthy during the holidays. And both have great websites. Even if you're not using their products, I would recommend going to their websites, taking a look at the educational materials, the recipes, and a lot of the blogs. Ben Bickman has been contributing. And so there's a lot of really great information there. But please support them also. They're supporting this podcast and bringing these great stories to you. So I just want to thank my sponsors, and now on with the show. Hello and welcome back to the Life's Best Medicine podcast. Today I have a good one because this is something that a lot of us really need to start thinking about. So a lot of us are getting into our middle ages and we're taking care of parents who are getting older, and we're trying to figure out the best path for them and how to keep them healthy, and ourselves also. So Hal Cranmer, welcome. A Paradise for Parents. You tell people your background story and also how you got to get to where you are now.
Sure. Thanks, Brian. I really appreciate you having me on. My name's Hal Cranmer, like Brian said. I own and run 4 assisted living homes, and they're residential homes that we've converted into assisted living around the Phoenix area, specifically in Surprise, Goodyear, and in Mesa, Arizona. They're suburbs of Phoenix, basically. I have no medical background formally. I started life as my working life anyway as an Air Force pilot. I learned how to fly at the old Williams Air Force Base in Phoenix and fell in love with living in Phoenix while I was there. Traveled around the world flying mostly C-130 cargo aircraft, dropping lots of special forces guys out the back and refueling helicopters and seeing lots of the world that I really don't ever want to see again. Got out. I had a blast doing that until I started having kids and came back from a deployment to Saudi Arabia. And my daughter was 2 at the time, and I picked her up and I'd been away for 4 months, and she didn't recognize me and started crying uncontrollably. Who's this stranger picking me up? So I decided time to move on. Got out, flew for an airline called US Airways, which has subsequently been bought by American and no longer exists, for about 3 years. And then 9/11 happened, which caused the layoffs of about half the pilots in America. So I was caught in that downdraft. There were no flying jobs available, so I decided I got to find another career and feed my family. Went into manufacturing. We moved to Minnesota, where my wife's from, lived there for about 15 years, and I sort of rose up the ranks to run a big machining plant that made aerospace parts. Got to still stay in the aerospace world a little. But as I was doing that, I was caught up in the house flipping rental property craze and things like that, and had a bunch of rental properties around the University of Minnesota. And I was talking to another investor who said, "Hey, if you like rental properties, um, you should look into assisted living. It cash flows a lot better, and the residents don't have keg parties and kick in walls like your college students that you currently rent to do." So sounded good. I looked around for a class, and there was a class in Phoenix on how to do it. I came down to Phoenix and went to the class, and the guy who taught the class had a realtor who had some assisted living homes for sale that was the listing agent on. And so I talked to my wife, and we'd wanted to move back down to Phoenix since I went to flight school here a long time ago. And my daughter at the time was going to ASU. So we were like, seems like the stars are aligning. Let's do this. So we kind of sold it all and moved down here. And I kind of got into it as an investment, but when I started doing it, I really just the people I met, the residents we took care of, everything, I just fell in love with it, and just it's become much more than an investment. It's become a passion, and to see residents happy, to see their families happy is just the greatest thrill in the world to me. And when I was looking around at houses, I went to a bunch of them as I learned this business and everything. I one thing that just kept bugging me was seeing people declining. And I know that's a fact of life, and it's going to happen to all of us eventually, but it seems like been given one life, and it's worth fighting for every day and enjoying every day as much as you can. And I just said to myself, there's no way I'm going to just let people just sit around and decline, waiting for the end kind of thing. I noticed a lot of the people who came into my homes the first thing they'd say to me, because normally a family would come check out the home and say, okay, this is going to be good for my mom and dad. And then mom and dad see it the first time the day they're moving in. And so they're fearful, they're concerned, they don't want to be there. My homes could be the Taj Mahal, and they'd be like, no, I want to live at home. So I noticed they'd say, I don't want to be here, I want to go home. And I thought, well, why don't we try to help you go home? Sort of, what is it? Find out what the consumer wants and give it to them. So I started with one guy, and I said, hey, if you really want to go home, I'm more than willing to help you. Let's do this together. And I kind of I just thought, okay, well, it seems like the assisted living thing is, like any business, let's cut costs as much as we can. And people were doing that with food. So I thought, well, maybe if you just eat healthier and do some exercise, you might get a little better. Worked for a lot of people. So I just started, let's cut back on the sweets and treats, that everyone wants to bring grandma. This guy was a grandpa. He was actually a pilot in the Berlin airlift, so I was kind of especially drawn to him. But so we just started feeding him salads. We started feeding him like lean meats, cut back on lots of bread and pasta. I didn't know anything about carbs and keto at the time. And he got better, because it wasn't, let's give him the lowest cost stuff we can get him from the grocery store to save money. I thought, well, if he goes home, it's a good story. And I hired a trainer, and he worked with him every day. And the guy, to his credit, when the trainer wasn't there, was exercising too. He really wanted to go home. And we got him to go home. And he walked out of our home. He came in a wheelchair and got in the car with his wife and drove home. And we went over to his house and made a little video, because I told him, you owe me a testimonial if we can do this. And I thought, hey, maybe we can do that for more people. So that's kind of where I got into this and started down the road of, hey, let's do better in assisted living than just give them a really nice house and feed them drugs all day.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for your service. I mean, that's people don't realize the sacrifice to families. I have friends who are SEALs, and when they're gone on deployment, it's really a tough gig being a pilot and involved in the armed services. So thank you for that, but thank you for your continued service for people, because our seniors are the lost. They're the lost sheep in this whole thing a lot of times. I mean, a lot of people are like, just stick them somewhere and get them out of here. I can't take it anymore. And, especially when we're dealing with dementia and Parkinson's and, all these different conditions and people declining and having accidents at night. And, I've seen the stress on families of trying to keep mom at home and try to keep her uh, healthy, and just worrying all the time. Is she going to fall and break a hip? Is she going to leave the water running? Are they going to have trouble, dad's leaving the gas stove on, things like that. And it's a huge burden for people. And it just seems like the seniors have been caught in the crossfires here.
I completely agree. And in fact, it's funny you should say thank you for your service, because when families come to me and they tour around, many times they burst out in tears because they're exhausted from taking care of mom and dad. They have no idea how this whole system works because no one looks into it until they really need it, and then they got to find somewhere like right now. And no one appreciates the burden that people go through taking care of an elderly parent who has Alzheimer's, who may be incontinent, who you know doesn't sleep at night, and then they've got to go to a job the next day after being up all night with their mom and dad. So I thank them for their service, and I think a lot those people are extremely unappreciated for what they do. And um it's it it's the reason my business is in business. But it's amazing the love you see between a child and the parent to take care of them through all those painful times. And I'd love to help them, because I think there's a whole lot of lifestyle, diet, other interventions they can do that unfortunately don't get publicized very well, that either can prevent their parent from getting that way or very much slow it down and make it a lot easier and a lot better quality of life for them, to see that.
Yeah, and it's such a huge thing of intervening too, because a lot of seniors are sitting at home staring at the walls. They're watching reruns on TV all day. They're not really living life. They're kind of just waiting to die a lot of times. And it's so tragically. Yesterday I had a new patient. She's 67 years old, American Indian descent, and she has 25 years of diabetes, poorly controlled. Doctor just crammed all the medicine on her, never talked to her about lifestyle, diet, exercise, nothing. Mood, how high sugars affects mood, excuse me, energy. And when I started talking to her, first thing she just sat back, she goes, "I'm really pissed right now." Like, seriously, that no one ever talked to me about any nutrition and diet. And I explained to her in half an hour, like, what was really critically important. And she said, "You know what I'm eating for breakfast every day? They told me oatmeal and orange juice and toast." And I was like, "Yeah, and your sugars are going crazy and you're shooting more insulin. You're trying to." And so just that little bit, she left here with such hope. She gives me a hug before she leaves and says, "Thank you so much." And like, that's what we do, and you can see it and you realize that we can intervene. But this poor lady is starting dialysis this week, right? She's got neuropathy in her feet. It's the damage is done. Now we're going to try to mitigate the damage as much as possible. But intervening, if we can intervene at an earlier, and even if they see how you're treating the parents that are seniors, maybe when they're in the middle age, go, I better take care of myself, because I don't want to end up where mom ended up too, of not being able to get up and take care of myself.
Oh yeah, I have a lot of families that are very interested in what we're doing, because things like Alzheimer's there's a lot of genetics behind it, and if you see mom and dad having it, you should be a little nervous. And there's an awful lot you can do to greatly mitigate it, if not prevent it entirely. And it's not a drug related thing that'll prevent it. It's lifestyle. And I think it's wonderful that you have podcasts like yours that get that word out, because we can. I mean, I hate to say it, but I'd love to put the assisted living industry out of business. it put my business out of business if we could. Everyone wants to stay home. My parents have told me, you have wonderful homes, Hal, but don't ever think of sticking us in them. So um, it's it really would be nice if we could catch it early, because that's another problem is I get a lot of people who are 95 years old and have all these problems, and you're just like, I can't do anything at this point.
Yeah, it's like you don't wait till you blow up your engine and then try to do an oil change. You really have to
Right.
start intervening. So people got them to you sooner and said, let's try to turn this around, see if we can get you back home. Because from a business model, if you have, you're going to have a constant demand of people. Like you're turning people away right now, I'm sure, because you can't, you know, you only have so much facility. And so if we can get people healthy and get them back on the road, and that's how I felt for what I do too. Is sometimes like just yesterday, I had a last meeting with one of my, or the last meeting for 6 months at least. But you know, I'm like, you figured it out. You're getting healthy. You don't need me every 2 weeks or whatever, you know. And so it's nice. And then the next person can come in, we can help. And so what you're doing is you could have some. Most people are probably going to be there. You know, they sell their house to move in and all that kind of stuff. But there are some people that really can turn it around and get their mobility back, because if you're in a wheelchair and your spouse is a senior with bad back and knees and hips, like they can't push you up and down the stairs, and those kind of things that need to be done. And so yeah, there's a lot to that. And in Arizona, I noticed most of the houses are single level too, which will allow people to be. In California, it's 2, 3 stories, and so it's because the land is so expensive. So it's hard when you start thinking about when you buy a house, go, okay, in 20 years, am I going to be able to go up and down these stairs anymore?
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. But I think there's something you said that's important too, is even if they're way down the road and have trouble, you should never give up hope, because we see people, yeah, they're not going to go home and live normal lives again, but they're going to get out of bed and be in a wheelchair. They're going to go from a wheelchair to a walker, or their diabetes is going to go down where it needs very little to no medicine. And by doing that, then the families can come in and take them out to dinner, or take them home for the weekend, or go somewhere for the holidays. We had a 98-year-old guy go on a cruise with his family, and we lent them a caregiver to go with them for a week to go on the cruise, and he couldn't have been happier. And he passed away 6 months after that, but that just made his life, kind of thing. And so even if you're not going to return to full normal wonderful health, you can still improve the quality of your life from where it is currently, even if you have all those issues.
Yeah, sometimes it's such a hard thing when you lose mobility. I had a patient, she was morbidly obese, she had back problems, she had a lot going on, heart failure, and she was basically just sitting in her house all day. I go, let's at least let's look into getting you like a scooter to get you outside and you can go shopping and do stuff and engage a little bit. Boy, her daughter gave me a bad time because I said, look, we're united in this. If she doesn't have to use it, like, but there's times where it will help her. And then probably 2 months later, her daughter called me crying. She said, I want to apologize. I said, why? What happened? She said, my mom went to the zoo yesterday with the grandkids and they had so much fun. And she tooled around that place and she got to see all the events and see the animals and just seeing that, because I know where she was 2 months ago, just sitting at home, like waiting to die. So those kind of things, and hopefully that's not permanent. Say, okay, if we can work on the nutrition and the exercise and all those things, and start just being consistent with activity, then we can reverse that where they are able to move. But for some people, when they have a damaged spinal cord, they're just kind of stuck, and we do the best quality of life we can for where they are physically and emotionally.
Right. All you can do is take what you got and improve it as much as you can. You know, you can't perform miracles, although sometimes you see a miracle happen that you can't believe. But
Yeah, I had an 89-year-old lady that I said, look, we could work on lifestyle and exercise. And we kind of, she said, my old doctor said I'll never walk again. I goes, well, I think you can if we start doing different things. And so, anyways, and she started going to the gym every day. And then from going to the gym, she made social connections. And with the social connections, she went out to lunch more. And then she started going for walks with people since she started using a walk. Now she's now passed away. This is years ago, but she was up walking again. I said, did you ever go back to your old doctor? And she said, no, he died. The doctor said she could
wow.
never walk in. She said, I called the office because I wanted to go walk in there and tell him. And they said,
Yeah.
oh no, the doctor since says us docs die at a younger age than everyone else because of life stress and lifestyle too, right?
Right. Yeah. And I tell people that, like they say, well, my doctor didn't say anything about this. I go, look at your doctor, because I'd see some of these doctors. I'm like, does he look like he's in fantastic shape? Is he following his own advice and is it working for him? No, he's pretty overweight. I'm like, yeah, so they don't have, no offense, but they don't necessarily always, whatever advice. And like you always hear, get a second opinion if you have some medical condition, just as you would do with your car or something like that. You know, doctors disagree. Every expert disagrees. I know when I flew airplanes, pilots disagreed on certain techniques to use in certain situations. So just doctors have, I mean, like the Department of Health in Arizona, I can't give my residents anything except not food and non-alcoholic beverages without a doctor's prescription. I can't give them Tylenol, Advil. I can't get them, moisturizing cream without a doctor's prescription. But with a doctor's prescription, I could probably give them heroin and no one would care practically. I mean, that's a little exaggeration, but I can give them alcohol. They can have a beer before bed with a prescription for a beer. They can have marijuana with a prescription. They can have almost anything. That's the power the doctor wields. And I think people just sort of take it as gospel. And I think there's some fantastic doctors. I'm not trying to put them down, but just as everything else, a contractor comes to your house and tells you, oh, we got to tear this whole place apart. You're going to be like, let me just check with someone else first.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the problem. And a lot of doctors are so busy they don't have time to write that prescription for stuff that's going to help the patient too.
Oh,
So
exactly.
it's really a wild thing where you can't give someone a Tylenol. Like if they were in your house and if they were a friend, you can give them a Tylenol for a headache, right? But
And,
those kind of
and
things. Yeah.
the family can come in and give them a Tylenol all day long. I just can't.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing because it affects the same, right? And so there's
Right.
a lot of that there's a lot of bureaucracy and stuff you have to deal with. And that's why, probably 8 or 10 years ago, I stopped going to nursing homes and assisted livings because it was so depressing. I felt terrible. I walked out. I left there and go, gosh, these poor sweet people are just sitting there drooling, looking at the wall.
Yeah.
It's such a hard thing after your whole life. And when you start to hear their stories, like this guy was an architect, this person built this, and it's so amazing where to interact with the seniors when you can really interact. And as a matter of fact, my mom's up there. She's in her mid 80s, and yeah, I go to her where she lives, independent living, and it's amazing. I'll give a talk and the seniors ask spot on, excellent questions. They get it. They're engaged and they want to be healthier, but the problem is no one's giving them the right information.
Well, I always tell people there's all those restrictions on giving some kind of drug or even over the counter stuff with the doctors. But there's the only thing that the Department of Health ever checks on me food wise is, do I have a menu posted? So that menu could be, practically ice cream and M&Ms for every meal, and no one would care. But, we're going to count out every little medication and make sure you have a prescription for each of them all the time. So you can see where the emphasis is. And
Yeah. Yeah, and I've seen that. I've talked to patients. I'm looking at their sugar levels when they move in somewhere. I'm like, oh my goodness, because they have prepared meals. I talked to the chef. Hey, can you like not make everything with rice and huge sugary desserts? And just this morning, someone posted something about Dunkin' Donuts has this pumpkin swirl uh, coffee drink, and there's no pumpkin in it. First of all, second of all, it's all chemicals. Third is it has the amount of sugar is 14 glazed donuts. And so
oh,
darn well people are gonna go, this low carb diet's not working. All I have is coffee for breakfast, and they're eating like the equivalent of like 14 donuts. And then I'm having this huge lunch, and and you go, okay, that's just not gonna work, right? And so there's a lot of that where people don't realize they get their fancy holiday drinks, and it's killing them.
oh yeah, yeah.
Like 40, I think it was 48 teaspoons of sugar that was in one regular coffee. And you go, oh my gosh, like and then
Wow.
you wonder why we're having an explosion of dementia and depression and diabetes and all these other health related metabolic conditions. That is too much energy. Like your body cannot handle that.
In fact, a lot of the people who come to my homes that have dementia or some kind of cognitive decline, definitely diabetes, um, they're like sugaraholics. You know, like if we don't have sugar out for them, they'll grab the little packets of sugar off the table for the coffee and just eat that. Like open the pack and put it in their mouth because they you can see it's incredibly addictive, and there you see withdrawal symptoms and things like that, especially dementia and Alzheimer's who don't know what they're doing, but they know I need sugar.
Yeah, and a lot of that is because their brain doesn't metabolize sugar. Their brain gets insulin resistant, so they need more and more sugar to get that brain function going. But then guess what? If you switch that same person over to ketosis, they could do way better mentally from a heart failure standpoint, from so many standpoints. And yet, people say, well, that's not nutritionally sound. You look at, as a matter of fact, the sponsor of this podcast, Health Code, hopefully they connected with you. I know
Yes, they
Joel.
did. And we're trying out their protein drink in our homes right now. So I'm gonna let them know how it's going. But I tried it, but I brought it in the home. I said, we got chocolate, and like all the heads perked up and go, we'll take some.
That's what I mean. And people aren't going to realize. And if you can make that, you could throw in some avocados for people who are trying to put on some weight. There's so much you can do, and just the recipes. There's protein bars that you could make protein bars and have your chefs make that. That's what I was excited about connecting you to, because our seniors need to have better nutrition. And when they have coconut oil and olive oil and all these good nutritionally sound ingredients, that it really does make a difference. And so I'm really excited to see what the outcomes are, especially in your diabetic patients, because I have my patients on continuous glucose monitors all the time, and I can see what their sugars do. And I see them have a health code or even keto chow. There's different stuff out there, and they're getting flat sugars, right?
Oh,
They're
wonderful.
decreasing their medications, and because all these medications too, and seniors, the other thing is it's very unusual to have a senior that's not on at least 8 or 10 medications when they come to you, right? I
Oh,
mean, they're
I'm in the 15 to 30 range.
yeah, exactly. And so you go, oh gosh. So no one looks at that. And I've had the fortune of being part of some studies looking at deprescribing medication. We've never done that before somehow.
Right.
In the
No,
history of medicine, we never deprescribe. Once you go on insulin, you're on insulin. It's like, well, we can figure out how to take you off if we monitor closely and do it safely. Yeah, we can do that. So that's what's cool is when we have and we have a captive audience there. And so if people want to be educated, we could really help. And if you bring in, you know, people like Krishna Hanks a lot of the like Ben Bakikio with exercise, there's so much that can be done so that they can actually get better and not just decline. No one wants to watch their parents decline and get
no.
worse and worse and worse and less mobile and not really enjoying it, because people don't realize that, I know just because of dealing with the nursing home system is that, people are laying there, and if they're not cared for, they get bed sores, they get all these horrific things that can happen. Urinary infections get missed, and there's a lot of stuff that, if someone's already demented, you don't really notice it right away, and it may take you a little while to figure it out. And then by then they have sepsis, and then you got a big problem on your hand. But if we can keep those sugars and get them good nutrition and keep their immune systems functioning as well as possible, then they have a lot better chance for better quality and quantity of life.
And you know what? One of the big problems in nursing homes and assisted living and everything is activities like, you know, not just put them in front of the TV all day, get people. We have some church volunteers who come in. I have that personal trainer exercises everyone now. But, there's still large stretches of the day that you try to find something to do. Well, when you start educating them about healthy diets and healthy living, they start picking it up on their own. They start reading. Like I have one lady who has become Maria Emmerich's #1 fan. I don't know if you know her, but she
Oh
makes all
yeah,
the
she's great.
keto
Yeah,
cookbooks.
yeah.
And I emailed Maria and said, "Would you mind talking? Just make a little phone call to this lady. It would make her year." And Maria did it. And this lady's like is eternally grateful for me. She's like she spends all her free time reading Maria's cookbooks and it's like, talking to the chefs how we can make better food for them and everything like that. So it gives them a purpose and a goal. And hey, I'm going to get better here. So
And not only
it's
that, you get a senior evangelist who's going to tell all the other residents, "Look, don't eat that terrible stuff. Here's stuff you can make that tastes really good." And
yeah.
really, that's the conundrum a lot of times for seniors, because we all know what they're getting as far as the big companies making these soybean and sugar mixtures for them to eat, right? And they go, oh, there's
Right.
this much protein, but look at all that garbage that's in there that's clogging their arteries and their brains. And
Yep.
so when you have some good nutrition, but the problem is the seniors are going, I want that sweet taste. And that's the problem. They're used to that ice cream after dinner or that shake. And so when you could do it, like Maria, the thing I love about her, and I use her, when I just combine my friends, basically, because I can get Health Code chocolate shake. I can throw it in. I mean, the powder, scramble up like 10 eggs, throw it in the blender, a can of coconut milk, throw 1 scoop of Health Code or Keto Chow, whatever flavor you want of the month, mix that, make a pudding out of it. So you can give all these guys pudding, and it takes like 6 minutes to make. It's super easy. So there's
Right.
things like that where you're getting that egg protein, you're getting them good nutrition. You get throwing avocados or whatever protein source you want, and it doesn't have to be a shake all the time. It could be actual
At a
meals.
bar.
Yeah, like a bar or a shake or different forms, because no one wants to drink a shake every day, right? You get bored with
Right.
that. So, and all these guys, a lot of these companies are making recipes like all the time. It's like, here you go, here's something for the holidays, here's something for Thanksgiving, whatever, that eggnog flavor stuff or whatever. So you could do, you could get a mix of and not have to eat all the terrible, those, 56 scoops of sugar in one drink is ridiculous, especially for seniors. It just, it's unconscionable. And it's amazing that no one steps in and says, hey, look, we got to give solid nutrition. The
Right.
problem is no one knows what nutrition is. Like this lady I told you about, that she has multi-system failure. She said the cardiologist puts me on this cardiology diet. The kidney doctor puts me on this diet. And so they're all mutually exclusive. She goes, I could drink water
Right.
basically is all I can have by the time I'm done looking at what all these different people are telling me I can eat.
Yeah, it's awful. In fact, I'm just pulling this paperwork up. I had a lady that was staying with us that was kind of morbidly obese. She went to the doctor for infection and everything, and turns out she had like what is it, the non-alcoholic fatty liver
NASH, yeah.
disease.
Yeah, they keep changing the
and
name, but fatty liver disease from
and so they gave her this Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics diet. And I just want to read: breakfast, half cup apple juice, 3/4 cup oatmeal, a small banana, 1 cup fat-free milk, and 1 cup brewed coffee was their diet recommendation. Lunch
well,
is
the coffee's
turkey
fine.
cheese sandwich.
The
Yeah.
coffee is good.
If it's not Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah, yeah. If it's not the pumpkin swirl,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I looked at that and I'm like, yeah, we're not going to feed you that here. And we were just starting her on a keto carnivore thing, and her infection flared up. She went to the hospital. She's starting to feel a little better, but then the infection, she went to the hospital. She was in there for like a month and got septic and passed away. And it's just so
Yeah.
sad to see, if we could catch him a little earlier.
And you could see what she was eating in the hospital, what they were feeding her. That's the problem
Oh
is
yeah.
it's so
It's
hard, and I kind of tease my friends who work in the hospital. I say, you guys are like insulin machines, because my patients back then, when I wasn't doing as much lifestyle stuff, they would go in on a couple meds for diabetes, but they take them off those meds in the hospital because they say they're too dangerous, that you can get low sugars, and then they put them on insulin. Then they give them a ton of sugar, and then they just put them on a sliding scale, and the more sugar we give you, the more insulin we give you. It's like, wait a minute. So they
right.
did get discharged on insulin because they say they're insulin dependent. No, they're not. You made them
Yeah.
insulin dependent because you gave them terrible stuff, and you're giving them
You made him
sugar
that
water in
way.
one arm and insulin the other. And so, yeah, it is really frustrating, especially, and you've been working with people that are morbidly obese also in one of your facilities, right?
Yeah, so we've got a contract with an insurance company. I went to them and asked them where's their big problem? What can they not get? And they're like, morbidly obese people. Um, and so I said, well, let's work together. I think I have some ways. I have a nutritionist who's fantastic. His name's Daniel Magyar. I don't know if you could put his link in the comments, but
Oh
he's
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
amazing. He's in Las Vegas, and he's like 290 pounds, but he's like 8% body fat.
Wow.
And he helps a lot of people like either weight loss or strength training, to bulk up too. And so he's been working with our folks. And yeah, we had a girl who's lost 230 pounds in about 10 months. And she's actually moving to an independent living facility very soon here. Like she went from about 550 pounds to about 320, and now she's, well on her way. We
Wow,
just
it's
got our
amazing.
second guy. He's lost 45 pounds in about 2 months, and his blood sugars went from about steady 150. He's down in the low 100 range now, and he's very happy, starting to go out and join some men's groups and things like that. So um, it it's just diet, it's exercise, and not, these people were in like skilled nursing facilities for 8, 9 years.
And they were
And
just going to die there. They were
right,
just going to die there. And so if you can get someone to turn them around and say, hey, there's something, and and then obviously once you get to the be that size, there's some emotional stuff and
sure. And we've got some
psychological stuff. And
counselors working with them and stuff like that too. It's not, I shouldn't say it's just diet and exercise, but it's amazing how, what they get recommended is gastric bypass surgery. And they've had it, like the girl had it, but
yeah,
nothing, it didn't do any good.
it's terrible
Yeah,
because it's if you don't learn nutrition, you got to learn and understand it, and it's a hard thing because there's so many people who get that gastric bypass and they don't realize the ramifications. Tro and I went through the data on I think episode 10 of our podcast going back, but we were on with a bariatric surgeon, Rob Sivis, and he said, look, suicide rate goes up, depression rate goes up, divorce rate goes through the roof. Every drug abuse, every addiction, shopping addiction, everything, because you're taking away their drug of choice, which is chocolate cookies. Now all of a sudden, what are they going to do? So a lot of people
yeah.
start smoking and they start doing other stuff and high risk activities where it's because they're trying to get that dopamine rush in their brain. And eventually what happens is they figure out how to stretch their stomach back out again and then they gain the weight back. That's typically what happens. And then they're really depressed and they're nutritionally unsound. They can't absorb vitamins and it's a really rough road.
Wow. Yeah, no, I can believe it. And like you said, when we put people on these diets to try to help diabetes or Alzheimer's or weight loss or something, there's a lot of mental issues that clear up. Like the people, I had a lady who had depression for 20 years, and she's like, I don't have depression anymore. I feel happy for the first time in a long time.
It is
So,
so that is of all the stuff, really. I mean, I love stopping meds and all that, but when I see someone smile and get their life back and feel like they have joy in life, because when you're less stressed and you're not having the mental illness, you can think more clearly. And people don't understand. That's why Chris Palmer and so many of these people are looking at the metabolic aspects of mental functioning. And our seniors, and not only our seniors, our kids are getting destroyed by this whole thing where they're eating sugar all day and they feel like they have to eat 6 times a day and they never give their body a rest. A lot of us fell into that and gained weight. Now we're trying to reverse that ship, but it's amazing that when I always wonder that when I see miserable people, and I wonder what would happen if they just changed their diet and just not stopped eating, drinking sodas all day and they stopped doing these things that are really bad for them. If they just stepped out of the way, what their body could do. And, especially if you add in exercise and counseling. And then, if you have someone who's struggling with boredom and eating all day because they're bored, if you keep them say, hey, we're going to go over here for this activity, we're going to do physical therapy, we're going to go over here and do, exercise class, band class, whatever it is, you really can intervene. And the other thing that I've really become impressed with is the importance of community, having other people around, you know, that really can inspire
huge.
you. Or like this lady who wants to cook, she's like, oh, Maria Emmerich, and she could use her cookbook, say, let me try making this dessert. Let me and have a cooking class with your people that you live with, things like
Right.
that. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, Maria has a Facebook group that she joined, and she's on it all the time, and making all kinds of new friends and things like that too. But that's a great idea to have a cooking class. Yeah, and I actually did a little video with Maria and sent it out in an email to all my families and residents, and I was surprised. I got some mixed reaction. A lot of families were very for it, loved it, and everything. But I got a couple that said, a ketogenic diet's only for people with epilepsy. Don't do this with my mom. She needs the carbs and stuff. So there's still a lot of resistance to doing this kind of stuff, and it's hard to overcome. And you're like, well, here's my list of accomplishments doing this. Yeah,
Yeah. It's a hard thing because there's always going to be the naysayers. There's always going to be the ones who struggle, and it really depends, right? If mom is underweight and she's got, no
right.
metabolic disease, which is about, in seniors, probably 1% of the population, maybe. Uh,
Hmm.
the rest of us is about 7% are metabolically healthy. So the rest of us really have to look at that. So yeah, and it doesn't necessarily have to be ketogenic, but I'm telling you, there is data on there, especially with heart failure and ketogenic diets, people do better. Because you're lowering that insulin, you're not holding on to so much salt, you get off your diuretics. So all these things, when you start looking at each individual problem, uh, you know, people do benefit from cutting out sugar. We're in a situation where we've had an energy overload our entire life. Now we have to figure out how do we rest the mitochondria, which is the energy producer. They do a lot of other stuff too, but how do we clean those guys out? Eating real food, laughing, having fun, lowering down the stress hormone. There's so much to this that you just try to attack whatever you can. And it's not all about the diet too. And so there's a lot of
No,
other stuff, engaging people and laughing and having fun and talking about
yeah.
the old days, those kind of things.
Oh, very much so. I mean, we took our seniors to a local high school and had their journalism students interview them for the school blog and said, here's this person's story. And it was really neat, all the stuff that came out, but you could see the seniors, just someone's interested in them and their mood picked up. They felt so good. They were like, we want to do that again. That was so much fun. But we learned one guy made a fortune flipping cattle ranches in northern Canada and told his story of him and his wife. Their first house was a chicken coop that was basically plywood, and he lit a fire in the middle of it and cut a hole in the roof for the smoke to get out. And he said it was pretty cold in northern Canada in the winter like that. Another guy was we have the direct descendant of John Adams, the second president of the United States, in one of our homes. Another guy was a POW in Hanoi for 5.5 years, shot down over Vietnam. So the kids get to see living history. These seniors get to talk about themselves, and you can see their health improve by having those social connections. Just we take them outside for 10 minutes a day. In Arizona, in the summer, we take them out early in the morning, but in the winter we'll take them out longer. And like even during COVID, we'd take them out when COVID came through our houses. We'd take them out and sit them outside for 45 minutes to an hour, get that fresh air, everything. We fed them really well. We didn't lose anyone during COVID. We
Yeah,
have
vitamin D levels and
exactly.
and I'm telling you, you get people metabolically. We know who was dying in the hospitals. It is very clear. I talked to a lot of hospitalists. I'm not a hospitalist, but I talked to them, and it was the
um,
metabolically sick who are dying.
oh yeah,
And
I
and, and
guarantee.
obviously there's going to be outliers. There are some that are young athletes, but for the most part, they're metabolically sick. So by getting them out in the sun, that's the best thing you could possibly do for a senior. Get them out in the sun, let them see the birds chirping. You
Yeah.
lock people in a room. And I'm telling you, this is where I really, really question what was done to our seniors. Really, is that I have a senior. She's a sweetheart of a lady. I've been taking her for 20 years. She's now in her late 80s, 88. And she was locked in a room for 6 months. She never saw a face. We did a Zoom meeting like this, and she started crying. And I said, "Why are you crying?" And she goes, "I'm seeing a human face. It's good to see your smile. I miss you. I haven't seen. No one's touched me in
Oh,
6 months." Right?
oh, poor
They would
lady.
knock on the door, drop the food off, and say, "Wait 10 seconds, and then you can grab the food so the person's out of the hallway." And people had good intentions, but you go, "My
Right.
gosh, could you imagine going that long without seeing a person or talking or laughing or getting a hug?" It's
Yeah,
incredible. They wouldn't
there's a
let their families
reason.
in.
There's a reason they put prisoners in solitary confinement. It's not to reward them.
Well, and the thing is, if you look at it, even with prisoners, they get 1 hour of outside time a day,
Yeah, that's
exercise
true.
outside time. They're not locked in their cells. It's illegal to do that. You cannot keep someone in their cell 24/7 because
Wow.
mentally it's so damaging. But we did it to our seniors. Are you kidding me? Right?
Yeah.
And we saw the mental decline and the just
Oh,
loss of hope.
tremendous.
And so
Yeah.
these places, I'm telling you, they were having huge mortality rates because people just lost hope. They were just dying.
Yeah.
You know,
And it was my business was booming during COVID because people would come to my home and say, "Wait a minute, are you saying I can come see my mom and she'll interact with other people?" And I'm like, yeah, we're a house. We can't isolate them. They got to go to the bathroom. They got to. eat, and we have everyone eat at the table. And they're like, I'm moving my mom in here tomorrow. My mom's isolated, like you said. So,
Well, plus you
and
have a small facility. So if you have 10, 10, like what's your biggest size? You have
it's
10,
10. We're licensed for 10 in each
yeah,
facility.
10 in each facility. So if you have 10, the odds go way down of having,
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
But
yeah.
we do stuff like, you know, bring them to the front door and have their family sit out on the porch and be able to talk to them like normal humans. We bought a commercial clothing rack and bought a clear shower curtain and put them on each side of it and did things like that. And we're like, I called the Department of Health, and they were really accommodating. They basically said, don't do anything that's going to get you in the newspapers. And I was like, okay, well, that gives me a lot of leeway. So, maybe it was a bit of a risk or something, but the
Maybe you
families
should be in
just
the
love
newspaper
it.
on a positive article saying, look,
Yeah,
we're going to treat our
yeah,
people humanely. Yeah,
I
that's
know. Or had a good result. I mean, we had one guy who just he got scared and locked himself in his room. He ended up going to the hospital and he died in the hospital, unfortunately. But other than that, everyone else came through. We had a 101-year-old lady who had like a 99-degree fever and sniffles for, 3 days, and that was it. Because we were
yeah.
sticking them outside, because we were feeding them well. We were giving I was working with some doctors to give them a bunch of vitamin D, vitamin C kind of stuff too, the quercetin and that kind of thing. But
Yeah, you do what you can, right? And just that little bit of vitamin D being out in the sun. If you're stuck in your room 24/7, you don't see the outside light of day. It's like being in a casino where you don't know if it's night or day or anything, right? Because you're not outside.
and the vitamin D levels just drop really
Yeah,
low
and
doing
that was
that.
a huge correlation with mortality, no doubt about it, because it has to do with metabolic health. If you're metabolically sicker, generally your vitamin D level drops too. So they're all kind of markers. But I think really just having people engaged, being able to see their kids and grandkids and I think anything less than that is inhumane. These especially the other important thing that you brought up that I really like is not only is it beneficial for the seniors, it's beneficial for the kids to see seniors and they respect them and go, wow, these people have done a lot with their life because there's, a lot of these kids have never been around their grandparents. They've never really had parents in their life sometimes, and so when they realize, gosh, there's some wisdom in these guys who are 90 or 100 years old. They're not just people you walk by and don't pay attention to.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. In fact, I tell people, if you're not interested in nutrition or exercise, go to an assisted living home, go to a facility, walk around there, meet the people that, just a regular one, and see them laying around, in a lot of pain, taking a lot of medications. It'll motivate you to start
Yeah, I
maybe
think so.
exercise and eat
Yeah, I
a
think so
little.
too. Yeah,
And
that got me thinking, looking at that, going, man, I don't want to end up. How do I prevent that? Like, then you start thinking, how do I prevent it? Let's do stuff now. And some of the big things are muscle mass. If you keep your legs strong, stretching, being limber, because people fall and break a hip, and then boom, it's over. That's the end
right.
of life. A lot of times, the
Yeah.
mortality rate is huge, especially if they have dementia.
Yep. And I've heard, break a hip, go to the hospital, die of pneumonia. That seems to be a lot of old people's fate too. They catch an infection in the hospital or something like that while they're there and in a weakened state. But yeah, going back to the kid thing too, I think that a lot of people, everyone wants to take care of kids and babies are so cute and everything. But I tell people, potential is nothing, performance is everything. The seniors are the ones, they've performed, they've built this world, they've given you the life that you have. you know Show some gratitude to these people, because without them we wouldn't be around. So it's wonderful that people love to be around kids and take care of babies, but the seniors deserve every bit of that as much as the little kids do.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is we've forgotten as a society. What's interesting is in my talk in San Diego, I talked about Rosetto, Pennsylvania, where they're 1,600 people. They had the lowest. This is after the president had a heart attack. They went there and see why these guys have the low. No one under age of 55 had a fatal heart attack, and the mortality rate above 65 was half anywhere else in the country. And they said, "What are these guys doing?" So they go there. They're a bunch of old Italians eating Italian food. They were eating a perfect diet. They were smoking the same as everyone else, drinking the same as everyone else. Their cholesterol was the same as everyone else. Their fat intake was the same as everyone else. The only difference was after 7 years of study, they said these guys take care of each other. The seniors live in the house with the parents, with the grandkids, so the grandkids know the seniors. So now the grandparents had a reason to live, and they would teach the grandkids stuff. They would, and the grandparents were very well respected in the family. So that's what kept them around, is that they had 85% of people either went to church choir, like what you're talking about, church choir, some kind of bowling league, or they did, bocce ball. They did something to connect with other people. There's another study you'd be interested with 65 and over, and they took them, and the intervention they did was 1 hour a week. They did choir practice for half of them.
Oh,
They had
wow.
they had better sleep, better self-reported health, fewer doctor's visits, and they were happier.
Really?
Why? Because they just went somewhere and talked to people for an hour. When they're at choir practice, they say, "Oh, how's the kids? How's life? How's this?" And they
Oh,
engage with
wow.
people rather than sitting there just staring at a wall. So we know
Right.
this. There's studies on this stuff, and it sounds
Yeah.
silly, but just little interventions like that, you realize, yeah, if you have people doing reading Maria Emmerich's book, or they say, okay, let's do finger painting today, or do something where your brain is thinking, or you're being creative, right? You can use those
Yeah.
skills that you've had, because otherwise you lose them.
Yeah. And I have a policy at my assisted living home. We don't have visiting hours. Families can come anytime they want. No phone call. They just knock on the door, come in and see mom. The only rule I have is the golden rule. Don't bring 10 kids in from the ice cream shop at 11 at night, to go see mom and wake everyone up. But
Yeah.
I tell them, the best medicine I can give your mom is time with her family. And so, having families come in, I tell them, take them out anytime you can, take them home anytime you can, take them on a vacation, whatever, but be with them. And we're going to try to make them as healthy as they can to do all that stuff. And I agree. I go a year and a half to 2 years sometimes without losing anyone because I think all those social interactions help tremendously. One question I had for you about the like ketogenic diets and stuff, I really try to push a lot of protein because of the whole sarcopenia thing and old age and people muscle wasting. I see people, and obviously I see people losing weight in my obese home, but um, doesn't it gets to like a lot of families ask, hey, if we put them on this diet, aren't they going to, turn anorexic or something? It seems like it gets you down to a healthy weight and then you sort of maintain it. At least I eat that way a lot and I don't gain or lose much.
Yeah, people can gain weight or lose weight on a ketogenic diet. It's not necessarily a weight loss thing. It's really about getting metabolically healthier. And if you look at it, and this is the big thing, is looking at body composition. So I have people that will lose, 4 pounds in 3 months, but they put on 12 pounds of muscle. Okay, we'll take
Right.
that trade, right? So you only lost 4 pounds on
Okay.
this scale, but that means you've lost 16 pounds, right?
Right.
Or depending
You've
on
lost
what the
16 of
ratios are.
fat. Yeah.
Yeah, 16 pounds of fat, and you put on 12 pounds of muscle, you know, and net loss of 4 pounds. So we get so focused on that one. But when someone comes in metabolically sick, and if you're talking about longevity, the biggest thing you can look at for longevity is muscle mass. That's it. And that's why when you say, well, the vegan diet's the most healthy, is like, okay, just being skinny doesn't make you healthy.
No,
If you
there's
don't
the
have muscle
skinny fat.
mass, you're more likely for, you look at the data, osteoporosis fractures, you're more likely to have, uh, and you look at what's the leading cause of death in vegans, cardiovascular disease.
Oh, really?
It
Really?
doesn't, we're not exempt from that. So you look and you go, okay, if I'm going to try to, if I look at someone like Ben Bakikia, who's in his mid 70s, he's all muscle and he's fit and he's out laughing and having fun. I was teasing him. I go, you figured this thing out, didn't you? You're laughing, you're having fun, you're learning all the time. You keep your brain active. You're working out. I mean, he gets it, right? So it's things like that where you say, yeah, you want to maintain muscle mass. So if you put them on a calorie restricted diet and they're losing weight, then you go, okay, that's not a very good thing, because they're going to up a certain percentage, especially if they're not sleeping well, is going to be
Right.
muscle mass. That's not a healthy way to lose weight, is muscle mass. So for instance, your 400 or 500 pound people, you don't want them to lose a majority of muscle. You want them to lose fat.
Right.
And for
Oh,
those people, a
absolutely.
ketogenic diet is a slam dunk. But when you have a senior who might be, lower weight or middle weight, so if you're giving them something like health code with avocados and boosting up the healthy fat intake, they're eating olives and olive oil on their, yeah, that's gonna. It's not that it's ketogenic is gonna make them lose weight necessarily. It's that you want them to have losing. Really, the reality is losing visceral fat, the fat around the organs, and putting on muscle mass. And as you put on muscle mass, you lose visceral fat. So that's part of the reason why people live longer with more muscle mass. And that's why these big muscle guys can eat like whatever they like. Your guy who's like 270 and he's all
Yeah.
muscle. He can get away with
Oh,
way more carbs than someone who doesn't have any muscle mass because it's going to go
right.
in the muscle. Who cares if you're working out? But if you're
Yeah.
sitting there all day, is a different deal. But yeah, there's so much confusion out there because if you give someone salmon and spinach and broccoli and a healthy diet, and that could be ketogenic, right?
Oh, yeah.
Especially you throw some olive oil on top of it or some butter on top of it. So it
Right.
just depends on what you're trying to accomplish for that one person,
Okay.
because not everyone's the same. So not everyone has to eat the same things. And some people are going to eat more carbs than others. So if they want to have blueberries and strawberries and they're not full blown diabetic, fine. If they're full
Yeah.
blown diabetic, you got to be really strict with that at the beginning, at least to get them so they have somewhere to put that extra sugar. So basically, diabetes is when you run out of storage units, right? You have nowhere else to put the extra sugar, and you're like, your body goes, okay, I can't put this anywhere else. Everything's full. You have to pee it out, and that's when you get really sick with diabetes.
Okay.
So
Good to
so
know.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
I,
either
I
way, mitochondrial function of the brain, all this stuff, mental functioning. That's why I was really intrigued to get you dialed in with health code and say, look, let's give our seniors some health code. Let's give them some bars, protein bars, where they're getting a good protein source, a good fat source, and they're cutting out all the processed sugar as much as possible, and see how they do. And I think
right.
you're going to see. I know you'll see benefits in the patients.
Oh, I'm seeing it now. I've got a lady who we've got her on this sort of Bredesen protocol program, and her test score on this slum test, which is the St. Louis University something that measures dementia, went from a 15, 1 to 20 is that you definitely have dementia.
Hmm.
Her latest score was 22. So she's
Wow.
in the mild cognitive decline. Now we've got her on a strict ketogenic diet, and we actually give her exogenous ketones too. I think it's called Perfect Keto or something like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
It's a drink mix we give her. But she's exercising. We're doing red light therapy with her. We're doing saunas with her, all the sort of protocol things. But it makes a huge difference. And to see her go out with her family and her daughter go, Mom, you didn't forget anything for our 3 hour lunch today, is just, I mean, that's what makes your day to hear stuff like that.
Yeah, that is amazing. And intervene. If you don't intervene, they're going to go downhill. There's no doubt about it. You don't get better from that. So
Right.
to hear that, I mean, the scores go getting better with time. I mean, they get worse with
Right.
time. So even
Yeah.
if it stayed the same, you're doing something beneficial because it hasn't declined.
Yeah. We actually had a lady that was on Momentine, I think is the Alzheimer's drug.
Yes.
We cut her back on that as we did the diet and everything and worked with the doctor to do that. And her memory improved when they cut back on the drug. So it's, you know, I, it's it's amazing that it actually works. I mean, it's not going to work for everyone, and it's hard to get. It's going to be really hard to cure Alzheimer's or whatever, but it's um, you can get improvements. And the companies I'm working with tell me success stories of even like one lady who had terrible memory problems. They did a bunch of investigating and found out, well, she loved to garden. In her little shed outside, her husband kept all these cans of old gasoline in the shed that he just never threw away. And she was breathing in those fumes. And over time, that triggered her dementia. And so they cleansed her out of that stuff, and her memory came completely back. So there's a lot you can do, especially if you catch it early, that you can bring memories back. If you, it's just you got to figure out what's going on with them, and just adopting the whole lifestyle change, and doing everything you can, sort of throwing the kitchen sink at it. There's a very good chance that it can come back.
Yeah, there's so much of that, and people don't realize even getting the gut microbiome healthy again, all these little bacteria in your gut, there's a lot of interplay with
Mhm.
that and mental illness and depression and dementia. And so we're in the infancy, and I know people who've
Yeah.
done fecal transplants who do it, and she had a guy reverse his dementia by getting a fecal transplant. That's all. That's what the intervention was. Because getting the right back, it's incredible. Like some of the stories I hear from
Wow.
these people, and there has to be something to this, and they'll even have stories where they'll transplant fecal material from a skinny triathlete into an obese person. They start getting better. But the interesting thing is they'll ask them like 6 months later, they were craving pizza and beer before. Now they crave like kimchi and sauerkraut. And you're like, why? And they go back to the person who donated and they go, what do you crave? And they go, kimchi and sauerkraut. And it's like, wow, that's crazy how much of an effect it can have. And plus just decreasing inflammation in the gut and the gut lining and, getting the vitamin D levels, all the stuff you're doing, I'm really excited about. That's why when I heard about you, I got to meet this guy. I reached out to you because I was like, people are talking about what you're doing. I'm like, no one's doing that. Like, it's
Right. Well, I'd
amazing.
love to keep this conversation going because I'm like I said, I don't have medical training, so I'm relying on experts. I'm just trying to find the experts that really can make a difference.
Yeah, I think if we had our seniors in small facilities like that, and that was the model, I think that it's the same thing as I do in direct primary care. So we got rid of all the BS stuff that you don't need, and patient doctor relationship. We have an office manager, medical assistant. Now I have a PA who's joining me to help out with other stuff. And
Awesome.
so yeah, and so when people are educated, we can really help a lot of people. And doing it in a model where you're not just in a huge system where no one knows who you are, right? If you're in a
Right.
nursing home with 3,000 people in there, like you don't know anyone, you can't really know the family. It's impossible to do.
Yeah, I met a guy through Twitter that was in one of those big ones, and he said, "Can you come over and have lunch with me and talk about what you're doing?" Because his wife was in the home too, or big facility. And during lunch, um, he went back and got the chef to come talk to me and about what I'm doing in my homes. And the chef basically just said, "I'm sorry, we have a corporate contract with a service company. We just serve whatever they bring." So there's
Trust me, that
no
same thing happens in the
flexibility.
hospitals. The same thing. They go, we have no say. Like, what do you have a
Yeah,
nutritionist then if you have no say? You just have a corporate contract? That's ridiculous. You want to have
yeah,
good nutrition. It's like, and as long as we put our menu on the wall, we're fine. It could be all garbage stuff. Yeah, it's amazing. It's
right,
amazing. So
right.
so thank you for what you're doing, and I think it's such a huge thing. And then also, how, first of all, I got to ask you, what's life's best medicine for you? What makes you move forward doing what you're doing? Where do you go when things are hard? That kind of thing.
Okay, so I would say first of all, it's what you brought up. It's family, it's community, it's interacting with people that to me is the number one thing. Like I tell my residents, families, the number one medicine we can give them is time with their family. For me, time with my family. I went out last night. It was my youngest son's 21st birthday, so we all had his first beer together, or
Oh,
first
have
legal
fun.
beer together. He's at Arizona State right now too. So I think that's the best thing. That's where I turn when times are tough. My wife has been a tremendous support for me. When we bought these homes, they weren't doing real well, and it took a lot of work to fix them up. And I credit her for sticking with me the whole time. And I think seeing other people doing better and having triumphs makes me feel like I'm having a triumph too, and sharing that. And I think, I tell my caregivers, let's worry about the care and the money will come, because they're all worried about making money and, feeding their families and stuff like that. And it really is. I have I'm very blessed. I get a lot of calls about my place, and I get a lot of compliments, a lot of nice reviews and things like that. And I think one of the biggest testaments is even when we have someone pass away, the families of the person who passed away will still come to our homes on July 4th or Christmas or Thanksgiving, or just sometime during the week, and volunteer and hang out with the other residents and help out and everything like that. And I think it's healthy for them too, that they feel like they're serving others as well.
Yeah, and also that they did the right thing for mom and dad, right? You want to make sure you like get them in a place where they're gonna fly as much as possible, and that they have the best quality of life,
Yes.
and that's a huge thing. So I
Yeah.
love what you're doing. That's why I was excited to get you on for sure.
Yeah. Well, I love what you're doing too, Brian. So please keep it up and let's stay in touch.
All right, and how do people track you down if they want to contact you either on social media or on to
Okay. Yep.
get on the
So
waiting list or whatever to get mom or dad in?
my Twitter thing is a paradise for parents, or at Hal Cranmer. Um, our Facebook page is a paradise for parents assisted living. I have a website, a paradiseforparents.com, and I'm going to start sending out emails to people who are interested of what we're doing in our homes and what we're finding works and what doesn't and everything. and you
Cool.
can sign up for that at fightmemoryloss.com. So, and then if you don't mind that, that trainer of mine, dmprotrainer.com, his name's Daniel Magyar. I can follow up with you or something, give you that. If you want to transform your body, he's the one to do it.
That's awesome. And we'll put that all in the show notes too, so people can go and listen. So, that will be on lifesbestmedicine.com. And yeah, I love what you're doing. I'm really excited, and I'll be down to one of your places soon. I haven't had a chance
Please
yet,
do.
but I'm still in the transitioning stage here. But I know we get a pretty good team to come in and just help with nutrition, exercise,
I would love that.
mood stuff, and even just counting your blessings. You get people to count their blessings of what's been good in their life for 5 minutes a day. That makes a difference.
It does. Gratitude is huge. And I think I recently converted to being a Catholic. My wife was Catholic, and I figured I needed to do this eventually. But one thing I notice, I'm not trying to bring too much religion in, but sacrificing makes a big deal. And it doesn't have to be a huge thing like fasting or, giving up social media for a day or, giving your time to help others or something like that is a huge another piece that every time I feel like I'm sacrificing something, or helping someone else out, giving to others, really comes back and helps me in my health too.
Yeah, and like you said, the golden rule, love your neighbor, right? And put your neighbor before yourself sometimes, and all those things are so critically important. And that's one thing our seniors know. They know that. Like when you talk to them, they know they've served, they've done stuff for the community, they've been involved, and so that's why it's so hard to see them end up the way they end up sometimes. If they're not
Yes.
if they're not able to use those skills they've learned or teach the next generation what's important and what values are important. And then the value of family and community, all those things. Because if you're a miserable person, you're like no one wants to be around you anyway. So you might as well have fun and smile a little bit and bring good to the world. Know you've left a positive impact. And like you said, is when you see someone else doing better, that you had a part of that, it makes you get some satisfaction out of that. To see someone
Tremendous.
leave or be able to walk again, or their mental status gets better and they can remember lunch with their daughter, things like that. These little steps that are massive, massive
Oh yeah.
things.
Yeah, it's something they haven't experienced in years. It makes them feel so good.
All right, man. Thanks so much. It was such a joy having you, and we'll get this out soon. And everyone, be kind to yourself, be kind to others. There's some great nuggets here. If you're struggling or someone's struggling, reach out, try to figure out how to get the nutrition right, get the exercise right, and engagement, all these other things that help people get younger. Maybe that's the fountain of youth, is that we take care of each other and are kind and smile and really engage with each other. So have a
Sure
great
is.
day. Thanks, Hal.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate your support. We would greatly appreciate a positive thumbs up on all of the platforms like iTunes and Spotify or wherever you're listening. And we just thank you for our Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate your help in getting this message out. We think there's a lot of important information. And hopefully this helps you. Have a great day. And thank you for listening. And thank you for your support.